It's strange how, sometimes, the greatest stories begin in the quietest places. And maybe no one tells you this, but there's a kind of pain only those who lived it can understand. The kind you hide so well that the world truly believes everything is fine. The truth is that many people live like this, smiling on the outside, falling apart on the inside, hoping no one notices. And that's exactly what was happening inside that house, where a strict billionaire, a hardworking mother, and a girl who grew up far too fast shared the same roof. Three completely different lives, under the same ceiling, yet living in worlds so distant they barely touched. You'll notice something interesting today. It's not the lack of money that hurts someone the most, it's the lack of being seen. And when a billionaire, surrounded by luxury and routine, finally saw the girl awake at 3 in the morning, something broke inside him, and something broke inside her too. Because there's a paradox no one likes to admit. Those who have everything sometimes see nothing, while those who have almost nothing see the world in ways no one else does. And before you think this is just another sad story, let me tell you a quick secret. When the truth comes out, life changes. For her, for the mother, and for him too. And that's why I'm telling you. Maybe you'll see yourself in parts of this story, even if you don't notice it at first. Because who hasn't carried a heavy burden alone? Who hasn't felt ashamed to ask for help? Who hasn't wished, deep down, that someone would simply look at them and say, "I understand you"? Today, I'm going to take you on a journey that begins in silence and ends in transformation. You might discover that some of the answers you've been searching for were hidden inside stories just like this. And maybe, just maybe, you'll realize that what once hurt you can one day heal someone else. So breathe, open your heart, and come with me. Because what was happening inside that house is going to touch places you never imagined. He had always noticed that people's silence spoke louder than any word that left their mouths. And it's curious how, so often, the ones who suffer the most are exactly those who make the least noise. The girl in that house was just like that, a small universe of hidden pain, guarded as if she feared bothering anyone with what she felt. It's incredible how many people grow up believing they must swallow their tears so they won't burden anyone. It seems simple, but living like that is like walking with shoes filled with stones that no one else sees. He, with all his fortune, never imagined someone so young could carry so much weight. And ironically, even surrounded by luxury, he had no idea how deep that silence went. The truth is, everyone there carried wounds, but hers bled invisibly. And invisible wounds often hurt more than the ones people can see. And, of course, he had no idea what he was about to discover. Many people live exactly like this, hiding internal storms behind a carefully practiced smile. And when you really pay attention, you notice the silent courage of those who try not to worry others. It's as if they believe love is measured by how much they can endure without saying a word. The sad part is that all of this accumulates day after day, like a backpack full of stones. A heavy backpack they carry while pretending to walk lightly, hoping not to attract attention. He had never been perceptive in that sense. He was always too busy with contracts, meetings, and numbers to read what wasn't written anywhere. And without noticing, he lived surrounded by stories he never heard. The girl's story, especially, would be the one to pierce his heart in a way he wasn't prepared for. And that discovery, of course, was still on its way. There are wounds only those who feel them know how to measure. Outsiders look and see a normal daily routine, the mother working, the girl studying, the house functioning. But no one imagines what happens behind the scenes of these small routines. Often, the person who helps the most is the one who hides the most. The girl said nothing. She held back tears, worries, fears, all locked inside, as if she were forbidden to show weakness. And that's like carrying too many secrets inside a chest that's far too small. He, who always believed problems could be solved with money, began to realize there are pains no $100 bill can touch. This realization would become a turning point not only in his life, but in the way he saw the world. And the more he observed her, the more he noticed signals he had ignored before, as if her silence was finally beginning to speak. He had seen employees hide problems to keep their jobs, but he never imagined a child doing the same. And that reminded him of an old memory, of himself, young, hiding his insecurities so he wouldn't appear weak in front of his father. The truth is, this happens far more often than we think. small people carrying enormous responsibilities. He began to understand that her silence wasn't just shyness, it was fear. The fear of being a burden, the fear of being replaced, the fear of being a problem. And when someone lives like that, every step becomes careful, every word measured, every gesture calculated. The girl had learned early how to survive in silence, as if the whole world were a place where she had to walk on tiptoes. And that, of course, stirred something uncomfortable inside him. When he finally connected the dots, he realized that the girl represented many people who grow up believing they must be strong all the time. There's an unspoken rule: don't cry, don't complain, don't show that it hurts. But no one teaches that this comes with an extremely high emotional cost. She seemed to carry the weight of a lifetime on her back, even being so young. It was as if silence were the only way she knew how to protect herself from a world she didn't yet fully understand. And he, used to seeing everything through the lens of efficiency, realized there was something much deeper behind it. Her silence hid wounds that would slowly reveal themselves to him. And that's precisely where an inevitable question began forming about what happened when everyone else was asleep. The entire house slept in an almost theatrical peace, the kind that seems custom-made for those who never had to worry about anything. But while silence ruled, a small figure moved through the kitchen with steps so quiet they barely made a sound. The girl washed each dish as if she were carrying the world in her hands, as if that simple gesture were part of a secret mission. It's interesting how certain tasks are only noticed when they stop being done. Most people wake up, drink their warm coffee, and never imagine who was awake hours earlier to leave everything in place. And how many times does life work the same way? We only value things when they're gone. He himself, owner of everything there, had never stopped to think about it. But that dawn, for the first time, he saw something that would change his understanding of the everyday life he thought he controlled. And that road of awareness was only beginning. Some routines are so discreet, they become invisible. The girl seemed to have learned that early. She walked through the house as if trying to take up the least space possible, as if every step needed permission to exist. While scrubbing pans, adjusting cutlery, and drying glasses, her eyes revealed accumulated exhaustion. And still, there was a silent determination in her, almost stubborn. Many people live this way too, doing a lot, receiving little, and still feeling like it's never enough. And the worst part is that even without recognition, they keep going. As he watched her movements, he realized that behind a simple routine, there can be a story of sacrifice almost no one imagines. And that awakened an uncomfortable flame in him, something between guilt and curiosity. He was surprised to notice that the girl knew exactly where everything belonged, as if the kitchen had been designed by her. The precision in her movements was impressive, turning the faucet on and off, switching cloths, adjusting the stove, stacking dishes without making noise. All that care, almost choreographed, showed that this wasn't occasional, it was habit. And habits like that don't appear out of nowhere. They come from necessity, from urgency, from fear of failing. He remembered a time when he also needed to do more than it seemed just to prove he deserved his place. But unlike her, he had opportunities she never even dreamed of. Realizing this sparked a deep reflection in him about how many similar stories exist out there, hidden beneath the carpet of ordinary routines. And of course, that persistent question began echoing in his mind. How many times have you done something no one saw, and still kept doing it? That is what defines the invisible strength of people. The girl was a living portrait of that strength. It was as if she were fulfilling a sacred duty, even without recognition. And when he paid attention to the details, each gesture seemed like a silent scream begging to be understood. Deep down, the early morning routine reflected an entire world she tried to hold together alone. The house, her mother, school, fears. And he started to understand that some people, from a very young age, learn that they must do a lot to receive almost nothing. This affected him unexpectedly, as if he were seeing his own life reflected in a reversed mirror. And then something even deeper caught his attention. That's when he realized the girl wasn't just washing dishes. She was trying to keep her entire life standing. With each plate she rinsed, it was as if she silently said, "I have to keep going." And that is something anyone has felt at some point in life. At work, in family, in school, that feeling that if you stop, everything falls apart. He saw, right in front of him, the purest representation of effort that no one sees. And that involuntary recognition awakened in him a desire to understand more, to uncover what was behind those late-night routines. Because no one, absolutely no one, makes that kind of sacrifice without a much bigger reason than it appears. And that reason would begin to reveal itself when fear stepped into the story. Fear, when it settles in a child's chest, doesn't knock. It simply enters, takes up space, and starts making decisions for them. The girl lived in that territory every single day. She hid the truth, like someone protecting a fragile treasure that could break at the slightest touch. And the more she tried to disguise it, the more her eyes betrayed her. He noticed that dawn, something in her wasn't fatigue, wasn't sleepiness, wasn't a chore. It was fear, real fear. Fear of losing her mother, fear of her mother losing her job, fear of losing the only stability they had. And it's cruel to think that someone so young learned the price of losing before ever learning the joy of winning. Fear like that folds people from the inside. And he was beginning to suspect that her routine was just the tip of a painful iceberg he had yet to uncover. He himself had felt that fear as a child. He remembered a time when they almost lost their home. His mother hid the overdue bills the same way one hides wounds to avoid worrying a child. And that memory returned to him with force. It was impossible not to connect the dots. The girl was doing the same thing, holding her pain inside, as if she had to protect the entire world with her tiny hands. Fear is like that. It makes you believe you must solve everything alone. And often, you do solve it, but you break in the process. The difference is that he grew up and had opportunities. She didn't. And that emotional injustice put a lump in his throat, an uneasiness that no longer fit inside silence. The feeling was clear. She wasn't telling him something big, something urgent. And that truth seemed ready to burst. The most painful part was that her fear wasn't irrational. Children living in fragile households learn early that any misstep can cost everything. And she knew that. That's why she hid her absences from school, why she made excuses, why she washed dishes at 3 in the morning as if saving her own destiny. He saw that every gesture she made was a desperate attempt to hold together something about to collapse. And it affected him in a way he couldn't explain. Because no matter how much money he had never been able to stop his own fears from growing with him. Fear of failing, fear of being rejected, fear of not being enough. And there she was, so small, yet carrying fears so enormous. It was impossible not to feel empathy. Impossible not to want to understand what, exactly. She was so afraid of losing the girl, of course, didn't have the words to explain any of this. Children rarely do. They speak through gestures, silences, and eyes that avoid contact so secrets can stay hidden. And it was in one of those glances that he saw something that completely disarmed him. The kind of expression only someone who has had to hide tears can recognize. A mix of guilt, responsibility, and fear of disappointing. An expression that says, if I fail, everything collapses. He realized he was standing before a cry for help buried under layers of silence. And that reminded him of how life is full of people carrying giant fears behind small smiles. His heart tightened in a way he hadn't felt in years. And right there, in that silent exchange, he knew he needed to dig deeper. Because that fear didn't come alone. Then came the question that changed everything. What could be so serious for a child to hide like this? That thought pounded in his mind the rest of the dawn. Deep inside, he knew no one puts in that much effort without a devastating reason. Fear like that isn't invented, it's lived. And the more he thought about it, the more his stomach sank with the possibility that this was far bigger than he imagined. The truth was there, hidden between the wet dishes and her tired eyes. And even without knowing what it was yet, he felt he had to uncover it as soon as possible. Because sometimes fear reveals not only what a person tries to hide, but also what they're desperately trying to protect. And that mystery would begin taking shape when shame entered the story. Lack of money, by itself, is already cruel. But when it mixes with shame, it becomes a weight that silently corrodes a child's self-esteem. The girl felt that every single day. Missing school wasn't laziness or carelessness. It was fear of facing her classmates' laughter. Because poverty becomes a joke in the mouths of those who never had to choose between eating and paying a bill. It's unfair. It's painful. And it's real. He only understood this when he overheard her mother apologizing to the principal for not being able to buy a new notebook. It hit him like a punch to the stomach. That world of inequality he'd always seen from afar suddenly had a face, a name, a story that was slowly breaking his defenses. And he began to realize that shame is a wound far deeper than any material lack. The girl hid her torn backpack, like someone hiding a forbidden secret. She held it tightly against her body, trying to prevent anyone from seeing the holes. He immediately remembered a time when he too felt shame, not from poverty, but from not feeling enough. He realized that shame is democratic. It affects rich and poor alike, each in their own way, but with the same pain. And that made him understand that humiliating someone for what they don't have is one of the most common and quiet forms of cruelty in the world. Watching the girl shrink herself to fit into the world made his chest ache in a way he'd never experienced. And with every detail he noticed, the question grew. How much had this child already endured? He now knew it went far beyond washing dishes at dawn. The bullying she suffered wasn't just about old supplies or simple clothes. It was about being different, about being unable to hide her reality. And when a child discovers that her life has become a reason for laughter, she starts believing that something is wrong with her. That destroys. That marks. That stays. He saw it in her eyes. That mixture of fear and shame that should exist in no one, especially not in a child. And he remembered something he once heard. Poverty doesn't humiliate. People do. That hit him deeply. Because, for the first time, he understood that she wasn't skipping school out of rebellion, but out of self-preservation. And that, for him, was a turning point. In an unexpected moment, she confessed, very softly, that she didn't want to go to school because they laughed at her again. He froze. Her voice trembled as if every word had to ask for permission to exist. And in that fragile confession, he understood that a great part of her suffering came from the sense of inferiority the school environment reinforced. Not because of the teachers, but because of the children repeating cruelty learned at home. He took a deep breath, felt something he didn't know how to name. Anger, sadness, protectiveness, maybe all three at once. And he realized that this bullying wasn't just a school problem, but a reflection of inequalities he never saw because he never had to face them. And it changed him. Then came the analogy that haunted him for the rest of the day. It's as if each laugh echoed 1,000 times inside her head. He pictured that over and over, imagining what it must feel like to live with such echoes at such a young age. Her shame had deep roots, and every cruel laugh was like water feeding that root. The more he thought about it, the tighter his chest became with the urgency to do something. Because shame only exists when someone feels they have no value. And for the first time, he realized he might help that girl recover the value the world was trying to take from her. And that would lead him straight to the discovery that would break his heart. Truth, when it finally appears, never arrives gently. It comes like a wind that slams doors open, like a light that blinds the eyes of someone who has lived too long in the dark. And that's exactly what happened when he discovered the real reason behind the girl's absences from school. It wasn't rebellion. It wasn't laziness. It wasn't disinterest. It was pain. Silent pain. Pain hidden out of shame. The principal explained, carefully, that the girl skipped school because she couldn't bear the humiliation anymore. And in that moment, something inside him collapsed. He wasn't her father, but he felt as if he were. Because some pains cross every social, financial, or emotional barrier. The pain of that child pierced layers of him he didn't even know existed. And that harsh discovery made him see the fragility of the world he thought he controlled. He walked to the kitchen still trying to process what he had heard. And when he saw the girl crouched on the floor picking up a fallen glass, something inside him finally broke. Not because of the glass, but because of the way she apologized, as if she had committed an unforgivable crime. He realized that this child lived in a constant state of expecting scolding, rejection, or replacement. And that devastated him. How could someone so young live so small? How had no one noticed this before? He felt a deep mixture of guilt, even though he knew he hadn't caused it. But guilt doesn't come only from responsibility. It comes from awareness. And he was finally aware of her reality. A reality that clashed violently with the luxury and coldness of the house they lived in. He asked gently, "Why didn't you tell me?" And she, without looking up, answered, "Because I didn't want Mommy to get fired." It felt like a blade cutting through his chest. She wasn't hiding the pain for herself, but to protect her mother. He felt a wave of respect, sadness, and indignation all at once. A child carrying a weight even adults can't bear. And he realized that behind the fear, there was something even more pure: love. Innocent, desperate, silent love. And that, more than anything else, completely disarmed him. He saw himself facing an uncomfortable truth. He didn't truly know anything or anyone inside his own home. As if that weren't enough, when the mother realized the truth had finally surfaced, she broke into tears. Not out of shame, but relief. She apologized repeatedly, saying she didn't want to cause trouble. And that hit him like an emotional punch. It was as if both, mother and daughter, had learned to apologize simply for existing. He approached, placed a hand on her shoulder, and said something he never imagined he would say. "It's not your fault. It's mine for not seeing it earlier." And in that instant, he understood the enormous distance between them. Distance of worlds, of stories, of realities, but mainly distance of awareness. And that needed to change. Seeing both of them crying rearranged something inside him. Suddenly, all the priorities that once seemed unquestionable, business, schedules, meetings, felt small. Ridiculously small. He understood that money could buy almost anything, but never lost time, never silenced pain, never stolen dignity. And in that moment, he made a quiet but powerful decision. He would help. Truly help. Not with handouts, not with pity, not with automatic charity, but with humanity, with presence, with real change. And that decision marked the beginning of a transformation that would unite two worlds, his and theirs, in ways he never expected. Because some discoveries don't just break the heart, they reshape it. And he would learn that soon. Living under the same roof doesn't mean living in the same world. And that's exactly what he realized when he began to truly see the girl's reality. In that enormous house lived two entirely different universes. On one side, him, accustomed to having everything at his fingertips. On the other, her, accustomed to improvising, patching things, hiding needs so she wouldn't seem like a burden. This contrast hit him like an electric shock. How had he never noticed it before? It was as if the house had suddenly revealed its small, invisible borders. The rooms she never entered, the spaces where she didn't speak, the moments when she shrank so she wouldn't bother anyone. He realized he lived surrounded by privileges so natural to him that they had become invisible. And now, for the first time, those very privileges made him uncomfortable. True inequality isn't just about money. It's about the feeling of belonging. He always moved through the house as someone who owned the space, because he did. She moved carefully, as if walking through borrowed territory. This difference hurt him internally, because he had never thought about the emotional weight of living in a place where you work, but do not belong. He remembered a phase of his own life, when he started working at his father's company and didn't feel worthy of being there. It was different, of course, but that memory helped him see that the girl lived that sense of inadequacy every day, only multiplied 1,000 times. It was like watching a movie of his own life, except the protagonist had no choice. And that made him see the world with new depth. His wealth suddenly felt giant, exaggerated, almost uncomfortable when contrasted with the simplicity of her life. And the most striking part was that she never complained, never asked for anything, never showed envy or resentment. That broke him, because while he grew up always wanting more, she grew up learning to survive with less, far less. And that made him rethink his entire story. He remembered times he complained about small things, times he confused luxury with necessity, times he believed he deserved more simply because he worked hard. But what about those who work hard without opportunities? Her life was the living answer to that question. And that realization made him look at his ideas of value and merit with completely different eyes. The social gap between them was so enormous that, for a moment, he felt ashamed of his own wealth. Not for having it, but for never understanding what it meant not to have it. He remembered the motivational lines he had repeated his whole life. Everyone has the same chances, just work hard. If you want it, you can do it. But now those phrases sounded empty, almost cruel. Because it simply isn't true that everyone starts from the same place. And seeing that up close, in the girl's routine, made any idea of meritocracy feel like a bitter joke. He took a deep breath, trying to reorganize his worldview. And then he understood that wealth isn't just about having a lot. It's about having safety, voice, space, dignity. And she had none of that. It was in this internal conflict that he finally understood something profound. Humility has no price, and it cannot be bought. It is born from experiences, scars, and falls that teach more than any diploma ever could. He had been in many places, luxurious rooms, million-dollar meetings, dinners with important people. But looking at that girl, he realized he had never been in the most important place of all, the place of understanding. And that opened something inside him, like a door he didn't know existed. It was impossible not to feel that two worlds were about to collide, not to destroy, but to transform. And that transformation would begin the moment someone finally chose to truly see the other. There is a moment in life when everything changes, and most of the time, that change begins when someone finally decides to truly see you. And that's exactly what happened with him. For the first time, he wasn't the boss looking at the employee. He wasn't the wealthy man observing someone who worked in his home. He was a human being looking at another human being. And in that moment, he realized something profound. The girl didn't need money, gifts, or favors. She needed to be seen, to be heard, to be acknowledged. Because the deepest pain a person can carry isn't the lack of resources, it's the lack of being seen. And it was precisely that kind of attention she had never received until now. He felt that awareness like a light being switched on inside his chest. That's when he began noticing all the small details he had ignored before. The shy way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous, how her eyes avoided direct contact, how quickly she said sorry, even when she wasn't guilty of anything. Those small gestures told an entire story, a story of fear, silence, and constant effort to disappear so she wouldn't be a problem. And he understood that many people live like this, so busy trying not to bother anyone that they move through life like shadows. He remembered his own childhood, when he wished someone had noticed his fears before they turned into scars. That memory created an unexpected connection between them. He realized that being seen isn't about superficial attention. It's about presence, about truly being there. And that day, he decided to be present for her. He asked if she was okay. He asked what she liked to do. He asked what her biggest dream was. And to his surprise, the girl took a long time to answer. Not because she didn't know, but because she wasn't used to being asked. That broke his heart. A child who grows up without being heard grows up believing that her dreams are too small to be spoken aloud. And he understood, right there, that part of her pain was the lack of permission to exist. Slowly, she began to talk. She said she liked drawing, but was too embarrassed to show anyone. She said she wanted to return to school, but didn't want to humiliate her mother by asking for better supplies. She said she was afraid of growing up without becoming a real person. Those words hit him like an emotional avalanche. He understood that this child carried fears no kid her age should ever carry. And while listening, he once again felt the contrast between their worlds. While he grew up with open doors, she grew up trying to break through walls. And there was something profoundly unfair about that, something he could no longer ignore. It was then that he understood, with absolute clarity, that much of human pain comes from the simplest and most neglected desire in the world, the desire to be seen. When someone looks at you and says, "I'm here," everything changes. Life gains color, purpose, direction. And he decided, in that moment, to be that transformative presence in her life. Not out of obligation, not out of guilt, but because he finally saw her for who she truly was, a child with fear, talent, dreams, and a quiet strength that few people noticed. And that decision would become the bridge to the next step, turning her pain into hope. Change doesn't begin with grand solutions. It begins with small decisions. And that's exactly what he understood when he decided to help the girl and her mother. There were no speeches, no promises, no extravagant plans. There was simply presence. A firm, human, honest presence. He realized that after everything the girl had endured, she didn't need luxury, she needed safety. She needed to know that, for the first time, someone was standing beside her. Someone who wouldn't leave. Someone who wouldn't laugh at her. And that small shift, that quiet revolution, began to transform the way she breathed, the way she spoke, the way she looked at the world around her. He started with the small things. He asked about school, spoke to the principal, requested support for her to face the bullying. offered new school supplies, not as gifts, but as tools. Because he finally understood that dignity doesn't come from charity, it comes from opportunity. Little by little, the girl began to open up. She started believing she might be able to return to school without feeling her chest explode with anxiety. She began to realize that the world wasn't made only of closed doors. Sometimes, someone could open one for her. And that was new. Very new. The mother, witnessing all this, cried with relief whenever she could. For the first time, she felt she wasn't alone in trying to protect her daughter. And he, seeing the strength of that woman, understood that helping wasn't saving. It was walking alongside. It was sharing the weight. It was giving someone the right to breathe. He had never thought of life in such human terms, but now it felt impossible to think otherwise. The house, once silent, began to fill with a new kind of sound. Shy laughter, short conversations, small spontaneous expressions of gratitude. It was as if hope was slowly walking through the front door. With time, the girl returned to school. She walked into the classroom with her heart racing, but with lighter eyes. And when someone tried to make fun of her, something unexpected happened. She took a deep breath and didn't lower her head. Not because the fear had vanished, but because she finally had something she had never had before: support. It was incredible to watch her confidence grow each day. He observed from a distance, feeling a pride he didn't know he was capable of feeling. It was like watching a seed that had been trampled on for years finally begin to sprout. And then he realized something precious. When someone believes in you, your story changes. It doesn't matter where you came from. It doesn't matter how deep your pain is. It doesn't matter how many times the world tried to convince you that you weren't enough. When someone sees you, hears you, and supports you, everything transforms. And it was this transformation, this shift from fear to hope, that united the three in a way none of them expected. He knew there was still much to do, but one thing was certain. From that moment on, that child would never face the world alone again. And that, for him, was only the beginning of something much greater. And at the end of this journey, it becomes impossible not to notice how a seemingly small story can reveal enormous truths about life. Because when we look closely, we realize that every silent gesture from that girl, every effort from her mother, every change in that man's heart, all of it reflected the battles so many of us fight quietly. The truth is that no one goes through life unscathed. Some carry visible scars, others carry marks no one can see, but deep down, everyone longs for the same thing: to be seen, understood, and welcomed. Maybe this story touched you because, in some way, you've already stood in one of their places. Maybe you were once the child who tried to be too strong. Or maybe you were the mother who held the world together with your own hands. Or even the adult who suddenly realized they didn't know everything and needed to learn how to truly see. It doesn't matter who you've been until now. What matters is who you choose to become from this moment forward. Now let me ask you, how many people around you need to be seen, but you haven't noticed yet? How many times have you swallowed your words, emotions, and dreams out of shame or fear of not being enough? What could you change today, to ease the weight you or someone close to you has carried alone? Life is full of these small opportunities for transformation. Sometimes, everything begins with a simple gesture: listening, asking, helping, reaching out, looking someone in the eyes. And maybe this story touched you precisely to remind you of that you can be the turning point in someone's life, just as someone once might be the turning point in yours. So if this story inspired you, moved you, or opened an important reflection, I invite you to stay here with me. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and come learn, feel, and grow with more stories like this. There's still so much I want to share, and I truly believe each story can transform something inside you.